Mark, do you want to open up with a word of invocation?
Heavenly Father, thank you for the ability for us to get together, even if it's on the internet, Father, but like-minded people that just want to serve you and learn more about you so that we can understand the words, not only for ourselves and keep it for ourselves, but to be able to teach other people to do the same. So we thank you, Father, for this opportunity. And I would ask that you bless every person on this call with the understanding that they need, because to be able to accept this teaching and actually put it into practice in their daily lives. So in your precious holy name we pray, Father, and may everything we say glorify your holy name. Amen.
Hallelujah.
So the thing about these two verses, Daniel 7:25 and Daniel 12:7, is that from what anyone knows, these are the two verses which speak of a 3.5 year time of tribulation or horrible change of world events. So we could leave the, you guys could leave your microphones and cameras on for a bit if you want to discuss this before getting into it. In that, as far back as I can remember being raised in the Christian ideology, it was always looking forward to a time in the future when there would be a 7-year tribulation and things would be going quite well until halfway through, 3.5 years. And then all of a sudden, I seem to recall that the big shot, whoever's in charge, is going to get assassinated, but he'll recover from a mortal wound. And then when he comes back, instead of them saving his life and, oh boy, we have him back, it's like, oh no, something went haywire, and now the guy's possessed by the devil, and all hell breaks loose on the face of the earth 3.5 years in, and it'll be a time that as worse than the world has ever seen. Does that sound familiar to any of you? Have any of you heard that eschatology? Eschatology meaning study of end time events.
I was raised Catholic. We didn't discuss those kind of things, So, and I didn't come to read the scriptures till I was 54 years old. So that was about 20 years ago. So,
does anybody else?
I've heard it from when I went to a Pentecostal church. I've heard those kind of things, and if I listen to evangelists, it's the same thing all the time. Way back when I first became a Christian, that I heard that kind of thing. Yeah, that there's going to be a rapture. There's going to be all these kind of things, and I, even when I first started, I read that a series of books about the rapture, and I really got involved in it as I was concerned. But now that you see the truth, it doesn't make any sense at all. Their theology doesn't make sense.
So I'm trying to just ask if anybody else has heard. This is such a big subject. The Seventh-day Adventists are famous for discussing this at large in week-long camp meetings, which are actually a version of Sukkot. The famous picture of the statue that's behind Kurt's picture here that we talked about last week is one of the images. Also, there's 4 beasts from Daniel 7, which we'll address. But I'm just asking if people, I just threw out a very small little blip regarding what this is concerning, just to get people on the same page. So in asking, does anybody else have a perspective that you can express kind of quickly or summarize, just so that we could see what kind of is the prevailing attitude regarding these phrases, or what people have picked up or gleaned over the years from different backgrounds? Does anybody else, maybe from a different background than Mark or me, does anybody else have a perspective regarding these famous words quoted as time, times, and half a time?
One thing that I've heard is the head that was cut off was the Arabs, and that's already been dealt with, but I better turn my mic off because it's getting noisy again.
How about you, Kurt? Have you ever heard this studied?
Oh yeah, lots of times. I don't know. I haven't heard anything differently than you've already expressed. I've wondered about times and half a time. That doesn't seem like 3.5. It seems more like 2.5. But I used to buy into it, but then Matthew 24 kind of seems like a big deal, and it doesn't seem to be in line with that. So I don't know.
Well,
I don't know. I stopped thinking about it, to be honest with you.
Okay, we could talk about Matthew 24 a little bit too, but how about you, Sally? Have you ever heard this studied?
Yeah, I haven't. There was also some stuff in like Revelations about 10 days of stuff that goes on in that regard.
Big trouble for moose and squirrel, basically, right?
Mm.
That's a famous quote from Boris and Natasha. Big trouble for moose and squirrel. No, sorry.
That's Rocky and Bullwinkle for you young ones.
That's from Bullwinkle when we were kids.
That's right.
I think eschatology is 20/20 in hindsight always. I don't think we understand it at all, to be honest with you. It's showed in a mystery. It's sewed up in a mystery, and it doesn't seem to make sense. Some things do, some things don't. I don't know.
Let me ask Greg. Greg, you're on, and I think you just joined. We're talking about Daniel 7:25 and Daniel 12:4 or 12:7, where it talks about times, and half a time. Your microphone, I don't think, is on, Greg, but do you have any perspective on what you've heard or been led to expect that that's referring to regarding the tribulation?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard the Christian theories and time and 3 years and this and that, but I know the word time is actually moed. I actually was reading Daniel earlier this week, but if you read chapters before that prior, it talks about 2 separate moeds regarding to kings of the north and kings of the south. So if you back up in the context, I think it could have referrals to those moeds, and whether that's relating to seasons or appointed times. I think it says appointed times. Just referring back to the appointed times of those kings and certain events. I think there's a context there that needs to be understood in previous chapters, and it's kind of just a summation there at the end, times, and half a time.
Just for people to latch on with their thinking, when Greg just mentioned appointed times for certain kings, that reminds me of what we studied last week, which was the statue of Daniel 2, where Nebuchadnezzar had the dream and Daniel interpreted it. And one of the phrases was that there's an Elohim in the heavens who appoints and places the establishment of kingdoms and the removal of kingdoms. And the word moed, which we'll talk about today, spelled mem vav ayin dalet. Here, I can write it out. Here, just so people know, this is a key word, moed. M-O-E-D is the way it's pronounced, but this would be our letter M, our letter Wa with a U is the way I usually write it. And then this is our letter O, even though it's an ayin, it's after L-M-N-O, Lamed Mem Nun. There's no stomach, so it's ayin and then pei, so O and then P. So that's our, in English, Mem Vav ayin dalet. This looks like it's saying muad, but it's pronounced moed. That ayin dalet is going to be a key word that we're talking about today. Key specifically, if we talk about ayin dalet nun, which is the word Eden, as in the Garden of Eden. So if you put a noon suffix on the back end of ayin dalet by itself is the word witness or testimony. So if you put a mem vav in front of it, what does that do to that word? Or if you put a noon suffix behind it, what does it do to that word? So that's, I'll refer to that again in a few minutes, but that's this critical consideration. So for Greg to just say it refers to a time or an extent that a kingdom gets to flourish or allowed to prevail on the face of the earth and then get its place removed for the sake of another kingdom. That's the series of these different metals of the statue behind Kurt's photo that we can see is the midsection of bronze or copper, which was referring to Greece. Coming after it sequentially was Rome, and before it, the arms of silver there were Media, Persia. But why this phrase? Does anybody else have anything they would like to throw in on the call here? Dale, I know you're recording this. Do you have anything to say that you want to, and again, this is just to get everybody up on the same page as what have I heard? What do we expect? And then we're going to project into what I'm just looking at the words and letters and say, what does it really say?
To your point, that's what I, the dispensational theology is what I grew up with, and I fully never really understood it, and but everybody was excited about it in the churches that we went to, and it was standard fare. One thing I could never rationalize in my head as I started seeking earnestly as an adult, I couldn't rationalize, well, wait a minute, how do you reconcile, where we fit in? I mean, there was this whole question around who we are and where we fit, what is our identity, and then, oh, well, we're an add-on, and all that stuff that went along with it. And there was, there's just so many questions that I could never, really get clear on. And so when I started following the Torah about 5 years ago, specifically honoring Shabbat, I was miserable. And about a month into it, I just was praying, Father, I don't get it. I just don't get it. And so I said, I'm ready to quit. And he asked me very quickly. He said, well, I say he asked me. The question came to my mind very quickly was, okay, I understand. So how's your fruit? Like, okay, I get it. So I said, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to continue doing it, even though I don't understand it. Whether I understand it or not, I'm just going to do it because you said to, and let the chips fall where they may.
Can I interrupt you for a second, Dale? What did that mean to you when you felt how's your fruit? Can you explain that?
What that meant to me, what that meant to me was if I had any fruit, it was near dead. When you look at the fruit of the Spirit, love, peace, what is it? Love, peace, joy. I can't even remember all 9 of them, but I looked at some of those elements of the fruit of the Spirit, and it's dead. It's like, okay, that's just not there. And I was embarrassed by that. And so I thought, this is, when you look at that fruit of the Spirit, we are called to have self-control. We are called to love each other. And Mark, you called it out correctly. Well, what's love? When you think of, the book of John, everything is love. Love your neighbor. Love this. Love. Well, when you're looking at it from that Greek and Western mindset, it's all external. It's all feelings based. Whereas, the Hebraic mindset is, what's the purpose and what is the function? What is the purpose? And how does that? Well, it's all action based. It's doing, and it's, if you look at those 10 commandments, the first 4, they're they're about protecting the relationship that you have with the Father, and the next 6 are about protecting the relationships with each other, and they're doing. And so I looked at my fruit, and it's like, I'm not doing, and there's just some serious gaps here, where it was, it was a mindset. Well, there was the knowledge of it, but I wasn't doing his commands intentionally. And so there's disconnects all over the place. And so this is where that awareness, Mark, came from when I was reading through John 14:21, in that affirmation. About 4 weeks after I prayed that prayer, after having first started honoring Shabbat, because he said so, and for no other reason, the words literally started jumping off the page. It literally came alive. And that was a huge, my wife got it. The reason why we started on this journey was because of my wife. And we were watching a weekend dispensational live stream, 3 days of speakers talking about all these things. But there was this one plant in the group, this gentleman by the name of Dr. Michael Lake, and he was talking about, from his former Southern Baptist preacher, Pentecostal preacher point of view, he said very clearly, he said, folks, listen, we've got to start doing Bible things Bible ways. And what that means is, I can guarantee you one simple thing. If we were to stand before the Father right now and we were invited to his lunch table, I can guarantee you 2 things. Number 1, he's not up there eating a ham sandwich for lunch. And number 2, he didn't move Sabbath to Sunday. It's not a thing. And so by that, but then he followed by saying again, we just have to start doing Bible things Bible ways. No more, no less. Just to the best of our ability, do what it says. Just do it, whether we understand it or not. That's what triggered my wife when she kept talking. She latched onto, and she grew up as Catholic, Mark, like you did, and she said, "What is this? Why is he saying that? What's going on?" Well, I didn't grow up Catholic, but I grew up, like I said, in a dispensational family. And I'm like, whoa. Let's just talk this through. Well, she just went off. Her spirit attested immediately to the truth, and she didn't understand really much more than I did, but her spirit did attest to the truth, and that was honoring Shabbat on Shabbat, the 7th day, and so. That's really where it all started from there. And after that 8th week, like I said, those words started jumping off the page, even if I didn't understand it. And it's never subsided. It's never subsided since then. And so, to answer your question, sorry for going way, way far afield, but that's
kind of what we do here.
Yeah, I know, it's awesome. And I'm so grateful to be here. But that's when you ask about the times and half a time. It was always very intriguing. It was always very mysterious, and always but there was, because I wasn't walking in his way, honoring his commands to the best of my ability, whether I understood it or not. Those words are hidden to us, to anyone. And it says so declaratively in Deuteronomy 29:29. And in the second witness of that same passage is John 14:21, where he declares at the very end of that, I will reveal myself to those who are following in my way and doing it obediently. And so man, when I saw the title of today's times I'm like, oh, that's that one. I gotta jump on this call. I would love to, anyway, that's why, it's so exciting. It's beyond me how exciting it is.
So let me intervene here. You just said a sentence paraphrasing what Elohim's voice has essentially or basically said. He said, I will reveal myself to whom?
To you. That's the thing that's the thing that when I had my Christian hat on reading through that, I just read through it and I checked it off of the list. But that's what I asked my question. I asked the question earlier. I went back and reread it again out loud. And I said, well, wait a minute. He's standing right in front of the disciples. Why would he say that?
But he's saying, I will reveal myself to who's the qualified at what time or what occasion. I will reveal myself to you who what?
Those who follow my commands not
Okay.
only have the head knowledge, but also do them.
Okay, so let me ask you now. I don't know if you've studied much about the letters, about the alphabet, but is there a letter that would fit the description of, okay, I'm going to give you guys insight. I'm going to reveal myself. I'm going to let you see something that otherwise you couldn't see. Do you have any sense of what letter that might be typified by?
That I don't know.
How about you, Sally?
First thing that comes to my mind was ayin, but then as you continued to talk, I thought of vav.
Well, vav is a type of connector or a nail, but the
Right.
letter ayin, if you look in the dictionary, the meaning of the word ayin, not only is it the name of that letter that follows the samach and that's before the pei, but it literally means weigh carefully, balance exactly, look closely. It's to scrutinize with a very scientific-minded engineering sort of calculation of intent, with perspective, with insight. And for Yeshua to say, I'm going to allow you to see something. So to me, I'm not going to say, well, it's this letter, not that letter. But by golly, that letter ayin sure seems to be about that business. Okay, now, if he's going to allow you to see something that's otherwise occlused, or occluded meaning can't see it, it's a occlusion means to be blinded to, there's some kind of portal that he's going to allow in order for a certain type of people to have access to the viewing. So I'm just telling you the way I think.
And that portal happens to be the letter Dalet.
Okay, well, there,
Or
Dalet
that,
is a door.
imagine that. What
Imagine
coincidence.
But then to have a people who are actively engaged in doing, in following, in listening, in having faith, in having the intention to follow. There's one letter, which is the action letter. Which letter is that?
Noon.
The bet.
Well, bet is a noun. Bet is an enclosure, a house, a body, but it's not.
Wouldn't it be Gimel?
The Gimel means to walk.
Gimel is a verb, but Gimel is also a connection between two things. You could say, well, he's talking about a connection. See, my mind would go, as Sally mentioned, to noon. Why would you say noon, Sally? What is noon?
Because noon jumps from the man, birthed out of the man, so it's an action.
Something being birthed.
Right, and alive and with action. So anytime you look in the Red Dictionary and you look at a word and there's a noon on the end, that's really, if you look at the definition, it sort of implies that definition and that word is in action, because the noon sort of is an action of what.
So I'm just going to show you. I'm going to show you one little way of analyzing scripture. I bumped into this methodology quite a few years ago, and I've seldom had an opportunity to explain it to anybody, but this is a perfect opportunity. So it's one thing to look at the spelling of words. It's another thing to, which I've done a number of times, which we did with Daniel 12, and we could go over it again if you want, but is to look at a sequence of a phrasing in the scripture, a chapter, a verse, whatever, and say, hey, look at it, follows the alphabetic sequence. Hide the plan, and here's your plan, Daniel. This is the Aleph. Hide the word to seal the book. Here's the bet, many shall run to and fro, knowledge will increase. Here's the Gimel, looks on this side of the river, that side of the river. Here's the Dalet, saw one above the waters of the river. Okay, so, and it goes through the alphabetic sequence of the 22 letters. But here's another way to take a phrase, a scenario, a verse, exactly what Dale just mentioned. So I'm not sure if you actually got an exact verse, but you've paraphrased a concept. Dale said, Yeshua speaking to his disciples said, hey, I'm going to give you guys insight to this thing that you don't know, because you are actively engaged in following me. Okay, let's take those three concepts. Yeshua said, I'm going to give you insight. And we determined, well, that could be an ayin. There's a portal that he's going to allow to see or go through. That's a dalet, because they are actively engaged in following him. That's a noon. Hey, guess what? That's the word Eden. Now, in Daniel 7:25, we're going to bump into that word 4 times. 4 out of 5 words, actually 5 out of 6 words, have to do with ayin dalet noon. Go figure. Now, if we look in the dictionary, we'll see that the word Eden, like the Garden of Eden, literally means pleasant, delightful, and enjoyable. As a matter of fact, there's a little phrase in Klein's dictionary that says it's related to an Ugaritic word that means a well-watered garden. So things are flourishing. Things are just fine. But it also means to do something unwillingly. It's like, what does that got to do with anything? To do something unwillingly, that's one of those weirdo definitions that looks like it's out of nowhere, that seems like it's what is volitional or intentional or willingness? What does that got to do with something pleasant and enjoyable? Well, we'll get into that in a few minutes, I think, in my perspective. But what I'm saying is that's one of the definitions which seems like it's got nothing to do with the subject. Nothing. But anyway, my point is, because of what we're talking about, we're going to try to figure out what this word, which is simply translated time. Ayin dalet noon means time. That's what they're saying. It's like, wait a minute, I thought I just said that it meant pleasant, delightful, well-watered. What does ayin dalet noon have to do with time? Oh, it's because the word spelled ayin dalet can mean until. Well, that's a progression in time until it reaches a certain, you can drive on this street until you get to the intersection, and then you have to stop and look and decide which way to go. So until isn't necessarily a progress of time as much as it's a progress of circumstances. You can work outdoors until it gets dark, or until it starts raining, or until the curfew where they say don't make any more noise in this housing complex. Is that a progress of time? Well, kind of. It's a circumstances. But the word ayin dalet is often translated as the word until. But then here, let me show you another mechanism of using Hebrew insight reckoned with Bible verses, you might say, that are more familiar, translated a different way. It's said in one of the Gospels, I forget which one, that the law and the prophets, I'm paraphrasing, the law and the prophets were until John the Baptist. You remember that?
Yeah, it's as if it's saying you don't have to do it anymore.
That's right, because the word until means you do something until you do something different, and it's no longer the case. So if you read that, the law and the prophets were until John the Baptist. Woohoo! No law, no prophets. We got a whole new gospel, a whole new religion, a whole new...
Unfortunately, that's how it's been translated, yeah.
But the word until is this word ayin dalet, which means witness and testimony. So if what it really said in Hebrew was the law and the prophets are the validating testimony, are the witness that John the Baptist is believable and worth listening to. I'm adding to the concept of what does it mean to be witness and testimony. It's like a detective who's looking for evidence. If he finds a shoe print, a tire print, a bullet casing, a comb with the hair that he can trace DNA, any evidence you find is a witness or testimony that points to the truth. So if the Torah, translated law, and Nun Bet Aleph, Nevaim, which is the words of the prophets, if those witnessed and were the testimony, the evidence that John the Baptist was on the right track, believable, worth attending our ears to, because he's not leading us astray with some new fangled contradiction of the Torah, but he was speaking in league with the Torah. Asher, Aleph Shin Resh, means valid, authentic, straight, in line with. It also is translated blessed and happy. But the point is, if that's the words of John the Baptist, then we should listen to him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the ayin dalet. But if it's translated until, then just that translation of that 1 2-letter word throws you completely off the track. Because if you think that ayin dalet only means until, that means we don't have to regard the law and the testimony, the law and the prophets. It's like, he validated and was authenticated by, just like Yeshua. Yeshua is the Torah incarnate, the word made flesh that every prophet spoke of. Yeshua said, if you do not listen to Moshe, you won't have any clue what I'm saying. You can't hear me unless you listen to Moshe. Well, that doesn't mean that soon as Yeshua came around and started talking, Moshe was thrown under the bus. Moshe himself is nailed to the cross and all his words are done away with. It means the opposite. So I'm just trying to show you how a simple 2-letter word, ayin dalet, can either keep you on track or throw you into a completely different world, a different frequency. Kind of like this is a sine wave pattern. It has to do with frequency, resonance, vibration. It's like there's a certain, if you know about the word cymatics, Cymatics, you put sand or salt on a metal plate and you play noise, or you play music, or you hit notes, or you run a violin string along the edge of the edge of the piece of metal with a string of the violin, or they used cymatics as actually water with resonance. Certain pitches of frequency, you get a beautiful geometric patterns, and you change the frequency just the slightest wavelength, all of a sudden it's completely different and distorted. And so they can tune into what's called the solfeggio tones or whole tones, one person calls it. The certain exact frequencies synchronize with geometry, and you could say, well, then to find the resonant or resident resonance, you might say the natural frequency of everything has a vibration, our human cells. And so therefore, like good binaural beats, good vibes. There's a whole bunch of different people now doing this, where they'll play certain notes, certain frequencies. And if you can synchronize with the natural vibration, your cells will say, oh, that's where I'm supposed to be. And they'll go back to where they're healthy. That's a whole nother study. We talked about that a few years ago, but that's another matter. But what I'm trying to say is this idea of saying there's a truth that the Torah, the prophets, John the Baptist, Yeshua were together with, of the same frequency. And then there's these fake doctrines, false interpretations, bad translations, which will throw you right off. If you get a certain vibration, actually it can discombobulate your internal organs, where they all just cut loose. They have practiced with crowd control using sonic cannons. they can hit a certain frequency and everybody starts defecating and vomiting and they falling to the ground. I mean, sound can do all kinds of things to you. So what's Ayin Dalet? If I just said Ayin Dalet noon, oh, that's the Garden of Eden. Ayin Dalet, oh, that means until. That's not the whole picture at all. So what we're going to talk about here is this word Ayin Dalet noon is the heart of Daniel 7:25, translated a year. A year, well, it's a period of time. Well, what period of time? A day, a month, an era, a dispensation? Where do they get year? So what I'm going to try to say is what I gleaned over the 50 years of being in the church through my life, that you have a certain expectation in front of you about certain things that are all in the same basket: the tribulation, the beast, the antichrist, the one world government, one world religion, man of sin, false prophet, four horsemen of the apocalypse, the four beasts of Daniel 7, Satan incarnate. And they're going to rule the world. And the Christians are going to be their play toy, their bugs, their tortured ones. Oh, great. Yeah, but there's a famous song based on a famous verse that says, he who tries to save his life in this world will lose it in the forever. But whoever loses his life for my sake, this is Jesus speaking, whoever loses his life for my sake will find it in heaven again. Okay, that's the essence of the Christian reality, the paradigm of time. Meaning, why are we on this earth? To choose to be his. Well, to choose is a type of door. So I can look at the Dalet and say, if somebody shows you the door, they're saying, do you want to stay or you want to leave? Or I'm asking you to leave. I'm showing you the door. Or somebody says, listen, if you get on an airplane, one of the first things they tell you is, here are the doors of escape in case the plane gets in trouble. A water landing, this is how you open the door and get out. So it's like, okay, now I know where the door is. So the door is an escape hatch, but it's also a portal. It's also a choice. If you're stuck in a cage, you're stuck, you're trapped. In fact, the word kala, kaf lamed hey, is the word for bride, and it means destroyed, ruined. It also means trapped. It also means all. It means, okay, that's it, everything. There is no escape. Kaf lamed vav bet. Kaf lamed bet means all heart, which is the word for dog, D-O-G, but also kaf lamed vav bet, interesting connection, is a bird cage. A bird cage or a basket. Why would that be the same letters as the word dog? We got a dog on a leash. I mean, so part of this study is looking at words, the spelling of words, and just letting your mind wander. Okay, so if somebody tells you in Daniel 7, I'm going to read this here, verse 23, Daniel 7:23. Let me back up. Okay, I'm going to back up to 7:19. Let me back up for me. Earlier, where Daniel says, as for me, verse 15, okay, here it is, Daniel chapter 7. Daniel sees this vision of four monsters. And the fourth one, gosh, it really, really bugged Daniel. So verse 15, as for me, Daniel, my spirit became uneasy in its sheath. That's like having, here, you put a pencil in a, rattling around because it doesn't fit within that. That's what he's describing. Daniel's just, something about this fourth beast just bugged the heck out of him. And the visions of my head bewildered me. I approached basically an angel in the vision, one of the standing ones, and I asked him for the truth concerning all this. So he, that angel, spoke to me, making the interpretations of the matters known to me. These immense beasts, which are four kingdoms, will arise from the earth. Okay, that's very similar to Nebuchadnezzar's dream back in Daniel 2, but here's Daniel 7. Now this is a vision Daniel's having. Verse 18, but the Holy Supreme Ones, it's actually Kadoshim Elyonin, Holy Supreme Ones is the way it's translated in Stone Tanakh. They, listen to this, there's 4 beasts, 4 kingdoms will arise from the earth, but the Kadoshim Elyonin will receive the kingship, and they will inherit the kingship forever, forever, and ever. They're going to inherit the kingship. Now, does that mean an eternal kingdom not on the earth, or does that have to do with being on the earth? We'd have to look at that, which we're not going to do. I'm just saying that you might want to look at that and go, what's that saying? Does that mean the Kadoshim Elyonim will receive the kingship? There's 4 kingdoms arise from the earth, but the believers, the saints, the Kadoshim Elyonim are the Kadosh is to say anointed, sacred to Yahweh, betrothed to Yahweh, and then Elyon is most high. So you might say these are the ones who are sacred to the most high. That's the way the real translation is, or those ones who are set apart unto the heights. Well, that's what we're supposing to be. They will receive the kingship, and they will inherit the kingship. This says Ayin Dalet hyphen Ayin Lamed Mem Aleph. Well, Ayin Dalet, there's that word Ayin Dalet. Does it mean until? That you don't see it here. It just says forever. So Ayin Dalet is also translated forever. But the word forever is Olam, Ayin Vav Lamed Mem. So then quite often you'll see this phrase Olam Va'ed. We said this was Moed, but if it's just this letter, these 3 letters, that's the U letter is pronounced as a V, and it's Va'ed, which is a nail, a bridge, a connector, some kind of a hook. So it's translated and ever. So Ayin Dalet then is ever, like forever and ever, or to infinity and beyond. Well, if it's already infinity, how do you get beyond infinity? If it's already forever, how do you get ever? It's a witness, like somebody saying, you betcha, and how? I'm telling you the truth. Darn tootin', that and how or darn tootin', that's the Ayin Dalet validating second voice. So when you have a picture, I'm just showing you concepts within the language of a Vav man standing with his hands raised up, his right hand, his left hand raised up under the heavens. Some people draw the letter Vav like this, and I think that's a variation of that, but I draw it like that on purpose because of Daniel 12, where he saw the one dressed in white linen above the waters of the river, who raised his right hand and his left hand up to the heavens and swore by him who lives forever. Well, if he has two witnesses or testifiers, it's said in the Torah that a man's testimony should be validated, especially in a court of law, by 2 or more witnesses. So if you have a witness, well, a hey, that's a letter of expression. So if you say, well, there's a Vav, and I'm going to put this letter hey on this side and another letter hey on that side. So there you have this little graphic image of kind of like wings coming off this Vav man, sort of. Well, that's almost like a menorah picture. I'm just saying that once you start looking at concepts, graphics, you realize that, gosh, this Hebrew language is really picturesque, sometimes just in the phrasing. But that's these two hays on either side of the Vav are actually witnesses and testifiers. They're Ayin Dalets. So the letter hey has an equivalent with an Ayin Dalet. It bears witness, it bears testimony, it's a revealing of what the Vav is about. That gets into a little deeper meaning, but I'm just trying to show you where some of this stuff comes from that I'm talking about. Okay, so they're going to inherit the kingship ed olam. Well, does that mean the eternal kingdom, or is it a jurisdiction of time on the face of the earth? That's for a different determination. It doesn't say. But let's go on to say, verse 19, Daniel speaking again. Then I desired to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different than them all, which is to say the other three, exceedingly terrifying, with teeth of iron and claws of copper. Now, we talked about the word iron last week, which is Peres Zion Lamed, and the word copper is the word nachash, which is the same as serpent or enchanting or divination, which has to do with like witchcraft and sorcery and magic. And it's like, why would he have claws that are enchanting? What does that mean? What does teeth of iron mean? It says it devoured and crumbled and trampled what remained with its feet. Now, I'm going to do two things with you here. I'm just going to read it and give you a surface explanation the way I've heard it. Then I'm going to show you a little bit deeper meaning with just this phrase. Verse 20, and about the 10 horns that were on his head, and the other one that came up as 3 fell before it, that horn had eyes and a mouth, speaking haughty words, an appearance greater than that of its fellows. I had watched as that horn waged war with the holy ones and was prevailing over them. Oh, great. That's where the Christians have no hope, no chance of survival, because this one horn that was empowered gets to just brutalize, kill them, and chew them up. Verse 22, until, okay, now here's the jurisdiction. That one little horn gets to prevail over the saints until, okay, there's a crossroads. The one of ancient days came. That must be the rapture, the second coming. And the holy supreme ones, the saints, were granted justice. Granted justice. Well, the word justice is mishpat. Could be zadikah, because zadikah is also victory, deliverance, and salvation, and also justice, righteousness. And the time came. Okay, now, so that means there's an appointed time, so the bad guys get to win, chewing up the believers until a certain time, and the holy ones inherited the kingship. So you could read this and say, well, that's the end of the world. When everything's different, because everything's just really bad until it happens. But this is Daniel pondering this, and then this is verse 23. This is what this angel said. The fourth beast, there will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all kingdoms. What does that mean? Is this a kingdom with a king, with a parliament, with an army? No, it's different than all kingdoms. Is it a religious kingdom? Well, there's been religious kingdoms. Rome was basically a religious kingdom. What does this mean? Well, nobody knows. It will devour the entire earth and trample and crumble it. Well, then we don't have any hope. We've been already relegated as sheep for the slaughter, as food for the fodder of this beast. Well, ain't that just wonderful? 24, and the 10 horns, from that kingdom, 10 kings will arise, and another one will rise up after these, who will be different from the former ones, and he will humble 3 kings. Now, I heard that happen in the ancient days of the Roman Empire. There was 10, the Vandals and the Goths and the Visigoths, back in those days, and 3 of those lesser kingdoms, you might say, were taken over by one. It became what we know as the Roman Empire. That was all in the BC days. Is that what he's talking about? Verse 25 of Daniel 7, he will speak words against the Supreme One. Speak words against the Supreme One. Is he going to talk smack about the creator of the heavens and the earth? He will exhaust the holy supreme ones. Oh, there's that phrase, kadoshim elyonin, once again. He will exhaust the saints, and he will plan to alter the seasons and the law. Now, I heard that had to do with the Christian or the Catholic Church. The Catholics won't tell you that. They'll tell you it's something else that happened, but the Protestants say, hey, the Pope changed the calendar and the 10 Commandments. So he fits that description. And they will be given over into his hand. Oh, great. Until time, times, and half time. There's the verse that we were driving at. So the saints will be given over into the hand of the monster for 3.5 years. Time times and half a time. So on the surface, you read this and it's like, what great fortune that we're born this day and age. If this is the time of the beast, the monster, then we're just, when I say fodder, I remember a friend said he was sent over to Vietnam as an American soldier. He says, we were just cannon fodder. They just lined us up with something to shoot at. There was a movie that came out years ago, remember, called The Expendables, and they had big tough guys, you know, Bruce Willis and I don't know, Mr. T, and I don't know, a bunch of big tough guys were in that movie, Americans, mercenaries. And they had all kinds of guns and ships and helicopters. They were like wealthy, like all kinds of crazy. And someone hired them to take out a Central American drug lord. And they go in there and just, they were supposedly the Expendables, but this was like a shooting gallery of Central American young men. They show all these guys in generic green uniforms. And so these Americans are just shooting them. When I say a shooting gallery, you go to the carnival and, you know, you take a little air gun and you shoot at the little ducks and the targets that pop up, boom, boom, boom. That's all this movie was. It's like, what the heck are we, why am I watching this? What are we doing? We're saying that everybody else in the world is just a shooting gallery for the American technology of the military industrial complex. The Expendables weren't these Americans. They were these Latin American young men. Well, are the Christians the shooting gallery for the beast? Is this Yahweh's idea of a carnival? A good time? Verse 25. But judgment will be set. In other words, okay, the bottom line is Yahweh's already determined the time, and whoever gets wiped out is, it's like, yeah. And they will take away his dominion, to be annihilated and destroyed completely. Oh, that reminds me of the book of Revelation where the devil gets thrown into the bottomless pit. Okay, well, maybe, or the lake of fire, two different occasions, but maybe it's that. Verse 27, and the kingship, the dominion, and the grandeur of the kingdoms under all the heavens. Well, that sounds like it's still on earth. Not in the by and by, but that sounds like it's temporal earth time. Will be given to the Holy Supreme Nation, the Kadoshim Elyonin. Hey, that's the saints. The grandeur of the kingdoms under the heavens will be given to the believers, the saints, the Kadoshi of Elyon. Its kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will serve and obey it. For how long? Forever? Is that the new heaven? Is the new earth? Verse 28, until here's the end of the description. I, Daniel, my thoughts frightened me greatly and my countenance changed, but I guarded the matter in my heart. Now, if you look down, just so you know, on Stone's Tanakh, 725, it says this phrase, time, times, and half a time. It says the cryptic meaning, or the meaning of this cryptic allusion to the time of the end, which would be the Messianic era at the end of days. So now they're defining when this end is veiled in mystery. Indeed, the angel commanded Daniel to, now we're reading Daniel 7, and now it's alluding to Daniel chapter 12, which is what we're going to get to in a minute. Daniel 12, verse 4, he was told, obscure the matters and seal the book. And the sages warned against attempts to foretell the end. Sanhedrin 97b. So what I'm telling you is that the Jews who wrote the commentary for this passage have said, Daniel was told to hide the words and seal the book. It's hidden on earth. It's sealed up in heaven. So essentially, don't even try to make sense out of this. Don't even try to unveil this. And if you're some scallywag who has the audacity to think that he can interpret this, then you're almost like asking to be cursed. Hey, wait a minute. That's the exact stuff we're talking about, that I'm talking about, that I'm proposing, that if we look at the meanings of the letters, we can determine what Daniel hid and sealed, because the word to hide and to seal fits the description of changing the orthography, the shapes of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. So I keep going on about this, just so you know, over the days, over the times, the years, because this is serious stuff. And if it really is hidden, And even though the wisest sages of the Jews say, don't try to mess with this, don't try to project anything. Wait a minute. The angel said, hide the words and seal the book. Ayin Dalet, hyphenated to the word Ayin Tav, translated until the time, and then there's this word spelled Kuf Zadi, which is simply translated the end. It's like you're on a straight path, you're on a road, and you come to an intersection, and now you have to decide which way do you turn, or do you stop, or do you go? It's a door, it's a decision. A time of change. That word Yod Kuf Zadi means wake up. Hide the word and seal the book until the time of the end. Okay, that means the end of the world. No, it doesn't mean the end of the world. Somebody told us it meant the end of the world. It might mean hide the words and seal the book until the time. Wake up. Wake up from what? Ayin Dalet is an open eye. Ayin Tav is an open eye. Dalet is a door. Tav is a sign of the covenant. Tav is just a mark or a sign. Every one of these letters are a mark or a symbol. This is a symbol. What's it mean? If I drew the symbol of this, somebody could say, oh, I know what that is. That's a treble clef. That stands for music. That's right. It's a symbol with a meaning. The letter Tav literally means a symbol with a meaning. If I drew something like concentric circles, you could say, oh, that's a target. I know what that means. If I drew a circle with a line through it, you say, oh, that's the null set. It means it doesn't exist. It means don't do that. I know what that means. So human mind is geared towards interpreting graphic symbols simply. Every letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a graphic symbol simply that carries a theme, a meaning. So if we could understand the meanings of the symbols, is hyphened or yoked to understanding the door, comprehending the meaning of the door, the fact we have a choice, the choice to do what? Well, Ayin Dalet noon, Yeshua said, I'm going to reveal to you guys, give you access through the occlusion, the portal, the wall, that's because you guys are doing what I said, because you chose to do what you were given the insight to do. So going back to what Dale said, his wife suddenly had this insight. Why don't we just do what Yahweh said because he said so? Hey, what an idea. But now the door, the choice is to you. I was talking to Wesley this morning, and I had said where the Dalet seems to be the heart of the alphabet. What does that mean? Yahweh gave humanity free will to choose, freedom of choice. That's a Dalet, that's a door. The heart of the covenant is, Moshe said, I put before you life and death. I urge you to choose life. Choose life. I put before you, I give you the insight that you have a choice between living, jumping, like Sally was saying, the vibrant activity, which is life, the evidence of life, movement, breathing, thinking, exhilarating, or death, which is cease to exist. So I can read this word Eden as I'm giving you guys the insight, the awareness, the perception that you must choose life. To be done unwillingly, how many times have you heard some kid say, yeah, I didn't ask to be born? Yeah, that's right, you didn't ask to be born. But then there's other people, a fellow by the name of Raj wrote a book about believing that we came from a pre-existence where we chose to be born. We chose to come down here, time and place, circumstance, culture, kingdom, family, nobody knows. It's all behind the veil. But to say Why did we choose to come down here? He was proposing, based on some insight, where he got it, I couldn't tell you, but that somehow we offended our Father in heaven, in the beyond the veil, whatever that means. And so we chose to be born on earth, to be given another chance to reestablish our relationship with him. And I could say, hey, that's not true. That's not Christian. It's like, whoa, calm down. Whether or not it's a Christian perspective isn't the issue. Whether or not anybody can prove it to be right or wrong isn't the issue. Just thinking, just pondering. We don't know where we came from. We don't know where we're going. We believe, based on what we're told, that we came from, little sperm and egg getting together and forming a zygote and an embryo and a fetus and a baby. And then here we are. And then where we're going is like, well, there's life after death. Some people believe there's a tunnel. Some people believe there's heaven and hell. Some people believe there's everlasting flames of torture forever. And other people don't. They believe the flames will burn you up and you'll be turned into dust of charcoal. Whatever. We don't know. All we know is here we are. Everything else is belief. But why are we here? No matter what is really going on before and aft, we're faced with a decision. What did Yahweh say? Will we listen? Will we do it? That's about it. I remember in the Presbyterian Church, they believed, they built their doctrines on something called the Westminster Confession of Faith, put together, I think it was in the 1600s, by a bunch of Holy Spirit-inspired, real smart theologians. And one of the first questions in the catechism is, what is the chief end of man? And the answer, shortly put, is man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Eden Leolam Va'ed, enjoy forever. Well, for Adam and Eve to be stuck in the garden, they didn't ask to be born. They didn't ask to be created. They were just put there. And they were enjoying the Garden of Eden, you might say, unwillingly or unvolitionally. So what is Eden? Well, if Eden is a choice, then how is Elohim going to give man the great dalet, the great door, the great option of choice? He says, okay, tell you what, you guys are here and you're able to live forever, but I got to give you a choice. There's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Do not eat it. Now you've got a choice. You're presented with the alternative option, obey or disobey, life or death, blessing or cursing. To say the Dalet is the heart of the alphabet is to say we're all here to choose life or choose death. Now, if that's what's embedded in Eden, the word spelled Ayin Dalet Nun, we're going to get to that in just a moment when we look at verse 25 here. If that's really what's going on, then who are the Kadoshim Elyonim? Who are the Kadosh ones of the Most High? The word Kadosh, Kuf Dalet Shin, or in this case, perhaps Kuf Dalet Vav Shin, it means sacred, set apart, betrothed, holy. You could say even purely or devoted or belonging to the Most High. They have a different reality. They have a different heart. They have a different being. They have a different mind. They have a different ruach of the normal people on the face of the earth, and they belong to Yahuwah Zavot, the Elohim of Israel, with other information that we have from the Torah. But if he just said, okay, you're my people, it's like, wait a second. He did that with Israel. Remember, he said, I made a great family and nation out of Abraham because I watched and observed Abraham. I'm paraphrasing scripture. And he says, I knew that Abraham would teach his children. To teach his children. Therefore, Yahuwah called Abram, changed his name to Abraham and said, I'll make you a father of many nations. Teach your people. But we've inherited fake teachers, bad teachers, teachers that are leading us astray. Ezekiel and Jeremiah talk about that. Isaiah even Deuteronomy talks about false dreams and visions and false teachings. Why is that pervasive of the scripture? All through the scripture, we've been told repeatedly, just so you know, the word for warning or repeatedly and forcefully is ayin vav dalet. Ayin vav dalet means repeatedly, forcefully, again and again. It's a derivative word of ayin dalet. And it also means to be warned, forewarned, and cautioned. He keeps saying, I'm going to give you the truth. This is what he says to Israel. This is what Yahuwah has said to Israel repeatedly. And I'm saying this because you have to understand the essence of this word to understand both Daniel 12, I think it's verse 7, and Daniel 7:25. Yahweh says, I have told you repeatedly, forcefully, again and again. It's always the same message. Choose life. I'm going to give you blessings that you were born into the family, you were born into the nation, or maybe you're a goyim who was born into a bunch of heathen rascals who don't know anything, a bunch of idiots. But now you have the option, once you hear the truth, to choose life. And man's time on the face of the earth, man's ayin tov is the word time. Man's ayin tov on the face of the earth is to provide him the opportunity to choose life, given the option between life and death. That's it.